this obviously fabricated story, and after it was made known that WorldNet Daily and the other plaintiffs here may pursue legal action, a so-called disclaimer was issued the same day by Esquire and Mark Warren. But it was not a disclaimer at all. In fact, it was intended again with malice, maliciously, to harm Mr. Farah and Mr. Corsi, as well as their organizations. And in this so-called disclaimer, Warren states, this is quoting him, "For those who didn't figure it out yet, and the many on Twitter for whom it took a while, we committed satire this morning." Isn't that ironic, Tris? We committed satire. It's like we committed a crime. To point out that the problems with selling and marketing a book that has had its core premise and reason to exist gutted by the news cycle several weeks in advance of publication. Are its author and publisher chastened? Well, no. They doubled down and accused the President of the United States of perpetrating a fraud in the world by having released a forged birth certificate. Not because this claim is in any way based on reality, but to hold their terribly gullible audience captive to their lies, to sell books. This is despicable and deserves only ridicule. That's a very important phrase. I'm going to explain that just in a second. That's why we committed satire in the matter of the Corsi book. Hell, even the President has a sense of humor about it all. Some more serious reporting from us on the whole birther phenomenon here. Then, in a comment that was made to the Daily Caller later, after all of this was published, Mr. Corsi, and this is at paragraph 15 of our complaint, and you all have a copy, called Mr. Corsi, and by extension the other plaintiffs, an execrable piece of shit. This is an organization, Hearst Communications and Esquire, which should be above the actions of Mr. Warren. It's surprising that at this point, Mr. Warren has not been disciplined, but he will be disciplined in the context of this case with large damages, because this did some real harm. The fact is the book is sold, and I'm not going to give testimony right now, I'm talking as a lawyer, but it hasn't nearly sold as well as it would have sold if the damage had not been done by Esquire and Warren, because immediately after this came out, WorldNet Daily Books and Mr. Farah and Mr. Corsi and others received a number of communications where distributors, booksellers, and others believed that the book was being pulled from the shelf, believed that Mr. Farah was going to rip one for Mr. Corsi. It destroys his reputation. So therefore, we have brought a multi-count complaint. Complaint for defamation, and even if the plaintiffs in this case are considered to be public figures, clearly there were admissions that this was malicious. The admissions that Mr. Corsi was an execrable piece of shit, and by extension the other plaintiffs, the statements that they should be held out for ridicule in the community. And in the District of Columbia, where this case is brought, there's another tort, that means a wrong in French and in our legal system, a civil wrong, called fausse light. And when you hold an individual or individuals out outrageously for ridicule in the community, and this is a community here in DC of the media and elsewhere throughout the United States, the statements can even be true, but if they're intended to cause harm, to cause ridicule, then as lawyers say, they're actionable. Mr. Warren has admitted, unbelievably, stupidly, that he intended to hold Mr. Farah and Mr. Corsi out to ridicule. So we have brought this case under a fausse light theory as well as a defamation theory. In addition, invasion of privacy, another tort in the District of Columbia, and that's when you take someone's name and use his name without authorization, and use it in a way which is misleading and deceptive, which aggravates what you did. Even just the first aspect legally is actionable, but when you do it deceptively, then it's intended to harm him. In this case, false quotes were taken of Mr. Farah, false motives were taken of Mr. Corsi, and there is a violation of invasion of privacy. In addition, we have a count in this complaint under the Lanham Act for false advertising. Esquire admits, particularly in the disclaimer, that they report on the birther issue. They like the fact that Mr. Farah, WorldNet Daily Books, and Mr. Corsi are out there talking about the birther issue, because then they get to take the other side of the story, and they get advertising revenues from their circulation, etc. Well, by stating facts that were false, that were manufactured, this constitutes false advertising under the Lanham Act. The second part of the Lanham Act, as we plead in the complaint. And the damages are very onerous. We don't have to prove any damage to the plaintiffs, to ourselves, so that we can certainly show that, and will show that, significant damage here. Not just actual, but punitive damage. But all we have to show under the Lanham Act are the advertising revenues, the net revenues of Esquire with regard to its magazine and its false advertising. And they're huge. The damages could run in the tens of millions, if not millions of dollars. We have not pled that amount in the complaint. We've kept it very modest. But the jury will get to decide, this is a jury case, what those damages will be. And those damages are trebled under the Lanham Act, plus attorney's fees. So the bottom line is this, is that neither Mr. Farah nor Mr. Corsi or WorldNet Daily Books or WorldNet Daily wished to engage Esquire or Mark Warren or Hearst Corporation on any of these issues. They were forced into this. They believe in freedom of the press. They believe in letting people give their opinion and letting those opinions be decided in the court of public opinion, not in the court of law. But we had no choice but to bring this case. And by bringing this case, we're actually upholding principles of freedom of speech, not seeking to restrict it, but to uphold those principles. Because if a reporter like Warren, and if a magazine like Esquire and its parent, Hearst Communications, Inc., are allowed to do this to people in this country, and to destroy them, to try to destroy them, and to actually harm them, then that is an abridgment of free speech, because we should encourage speech in this country. We should not seek to stifle it. So I hope that you all will take a look at this complaint, judge it on the merits, judge it on the legal basis, but it's very strong. In my entire history of being a lawyer, and I've been a lawyer for many years, and been involved in these kinds of cases, and I can make no predictions, but from my own personal opinion, this is one of the strongest cases of defamation, false light, false advertising, invasion of privacy I've ever seen. And I am very surprised and shocked that Hearst Corporation has not come forward to Mr. Farah and Mr. Corsi on this issue to seek to resolve it. So we had no choice but to bring this lawsuit. Thank you.
Stay up there, Larry, because we'll open up for questions.
Mara and Jerome, why don't you come up and we can field questions on both presentations at the same time. I do want to add something about Mara, who I've just met in the last couple of days. Mara is a lifelong Democrat. In 2008, she was a Hillary supporter. And I think that is worth pointing out because so much of this story has been mischaracterized with regard to, well, is it all politically motivated? We did not make up what you saw demonstrated here today. We did not manufacture that document that you saw on the screen today. Somebody at the White House did. And that's what she has demonstrated, and frankly, her work has been validated by every single expert we've talked to thus far. And by the way, I'd love to hear from some Adobe experts and some document experts who can explain these inconsistencies and anomalies that she has pointed out. Anyway, with that, I'll open it up for questions on both issues.
I got a couple questions for Mara. I kind of looked into your background, and you've significant expertise in Photoshop and Illustrator for Adobe programs. Do you have any demonstrated expertise in Adobe Acrobat or creating PDFs?
Yes, I have in most of the Adobe products, Illustrator, InDesign, Acrobat, and Photoshop are my major programs that I work with.
Okay, and did you, as you know, the original file will state what program the file was created in. Did you look at the birth certificate file in the program that it was created in?
Yes, and if you just look at it in Acrobat itself, you don't need Illustrator to see that it's fake. You can see it's fake in Acrobat just by knowing the ideas that there's a certain consistency that should be present when you're scanning a document. You have, I outline it in my report, explaining the noise, because I understand many people don't understand that. But when you're looking at this document and you see this noise here, okay? This could be from a normal scan. You see the letters don't look solid black. You see pixels next to it that don't have complete solid black. But even within these signatures, let me zoom in here. You've got solid black pixelated, bitmapped, next to anti-aliasing and noise. You have a mixture of that within the signatures itself. You don't get that when you scan a document. You can scan a document so that it's bitmapped, but the whole document would be bitmapped. You're not going to get a mixture. You understand? Does that make sense? I mean, it's you can't look at this and explain it that there's something wrong with my knowledge of these programs. There's something wrong with this document.
Why did you open up in Illustrator and not Acrobat?
Because I did open it in Acrobat. I looked at it in Acrobat and I saw a lot of anomalies, but I wanted to see if there was something more in this file that I couldn't see in Acrobat. You can't see layers in Acrobat. If it's going to be in there, if the information is still in the PDF file, you can see it in Illustrator, because Illustrator is a vector-based program. I explained that in my report too. I don't want to get into it too depth, but there's two types of graphic programs. You have a raster-based and you have a vector-based. Photoshop is raster-based, which means pixel-based. If you open it up in Photoshop, you're going to get a completely flat document that is going to be pixel-based. If you open it up in Illustrator, it's still going to be able to read any information in there because it's vector. It deals with math. It understands what's embedded in that program.
I have a question about Jane and Fisher with Adweek. How many copies were ordered of the book? And how many publishers or how many booksellers called after this Esquire report came out to cancel?
I don't have exact numbers off the top of my head, but I'm going to suggest that somewhere in the neighborhood of 65,000 copies of the book were printed and distributed. We have definite knowledge of one retail shop actually returning all of its copies of the book, specifically because of the assumption that the Esquire article was accurate. And we only found out about that through chance, really. The way we found out about that, I think, is very instructive. Somebody who wanted to purchase the book, a consumer who wanted to purchase the book, went to that bookstore, and he was told that the books had been returned. He went home and he emailed me. Now, I don't know how many other consumers did that across the country at other retailers, but you know, there's an old saying in our business that for every person that writes you, that usually represents 100 or 1,000 other people who didn't write to you. That's the way we found out about the one retailer, and the situation was actually corrected as a result of that consumer emailing me. We were able to, I can't remember if it was Borders or Barnes & Noble, go to the corporate folks and say, hey, here's what we heard, and they confirmed that the books had been returned and were in that situation at least, being sent back to the bookshop.
So Barnes & Noble, which is it, Barnes & Noble or Borders who canceled their orders?
It's, we've covered this story in WND, and I wish my memory was good enough to recall which of the two. I know it was one of the two major retailers, and I can get you that information later.
Okay. And what is the dollar amount of the grand total here? We've got defamation, looks like 30 million, false light, 15 million. I guess I can add them up, but each of these 30 million for tortious interference. Is this correct? Am I reading this correctly?
Yes, but when you put forth the damages in each count of the complaint, they're not